Hi, this is Pamela. In this video, I'll walk through the concepts of for loop, while loop, and nested loops. I found that pictures and pixels are hard to trace the codes one pixel at a time, so I've decided to create a very simple Turtle program to demonstrate the loops. I've written a method in the Turtle class that will just draw a simple line. Now let's go into loops. Here I have a class called loops, and my world and my turtle. The while loop format is while parentheses test and bracket codes. Basically it means while continuation test here is true, the code in the bracket will run over and over again. Once the test becomes false, it will skip to the codes after the while loop. Here's a flowchart from the textbook. So I'll write my code in the same order. First, I declare initializing loop variable integer I is equal to 0. Then I have while expression. I put I is less than 5. And then I have my statement. This will draw a line of size 25. And then I've added this print line to help trace each loop. Then I change the loop variable. I'll increment it by 1. So the statement will be the statements here will be the code following the loop. So here my variable is set as 0. While 0 is less than 5, turtle while will draw a line and print out the line saying which loop, and then the variable I will be increased by 1. Then it will go back to the while loop. Now I is equal to 1, less than 5. The loop will execute again. This will continue until I is equal to 5. When 5 less than 5 test fails, then the loop stops, codes inside the brackets are not executed, and moves to the next set of code. If I run this code, as you can see, we have 5 lines. And each line here is drawn when I was this number. So the first line is drawn when I is equal to 0. Second line is drawn when I is equal to 1, and goes on, and last line is drawn when I is equal to 4. Now let's move to the for loop. The for loop is very similar to the while loop, that they can be used interchangeably to achieve the same result. And this is the flowchart for the for loop. And the order and the execution is pretty much the same as the while loop. The difference is the writing format. The for loop is written like this: for parentheses initialization area, semicolon, continuation test, semicolon, change area, and then bracket code. Instead of initializing the variable outside the loop as done in the while loop, we can do it inside the parentheses. However, if you want, it can still be initialized outside and leave this blank with a semicolon. And then there is the continuation test, and then the variable is changed, done in the same line, instead of in the bracketed codes in the while loop. In my for loop, I've initialized my variable j is equal to 0. My test is j is less than 5, and j is incremented by 1. Similar to the while loop, the code below will run with j is equal to 0. It will pass the test, run the code, then j is incremented to 1, 1 is less than 5, run the code, j is equal to 2, and so forth. So if I run this, as you can see, it's very similar to the while loop results. Turtle for will draw a line for each j is equal to 0 to 4. Now let's move to the nested loops. Nested loops are literally one loop nested inside another loop. The first loop is called the outer loop, and the loop that is inside the brackets is called the inner loop. Here I have the outer loop. it'll have the outer for loop for the variable k initialized to 0, and it will repeat until k is less than 3 is false, with the k value incremented by 1 for every loop. My inner loop has integer L set to 0, will repeat until L is less than 4 is false, with L incremented by 2. And for every loop executed, I'm going to draw a line and to print out which variable for the loop so it is easy to trace. So for the nested loop, it will execute the first outer loop, then the inner loop will run as normal loop like the ones above. When the inner loop finishes running, it has completed the code for the first outer loop. Then the outer loop variable will be changed, then the inner loop, aka the code, will execute again. The inner loop will run until false, and it will go back to outer loop again. The outer loop variable change and run again. The outer loop will finish running when the outer loop test condition is false. When I run this code, the outer loop will run 3 times, and for each of the 3 times, the inner loop will run 2 times. So I'm going to compile and run this. As you can see, we have 6 lines. Since there are 3 outer loops that each had 2 inner loops executed, 3 times 2 is 6. And here's the order the loops were executed. When k is equal to 0, L is equal to 0 for the first line drawn. And then the next line is when k is equal to 0 and L equals to 2. This means when k is equal to 0, k is less than 3, so it moves to the inner loop. For the inner loop, L is equal to 0, which is less than 4, so Turtle draws a line and prints, which is k is equal to 0 and L equals to 0. And then L is incremented by 2, and then 2 is less than 4, so the turtle draws a line again. And still k is equal to 0, and then L is equal to 2. And then L is incremented by 2 again, so 4 less than 4 is false, so it completes the inner loop and goes back to the first outer loop. And this completes the first outer loop. And then the k is incremented by 1, and 1 is less than 3, so the inner loop starts again. It will start from L equals 0 again, and draw a line, L equals 2, draw a line, and L equals 4, stop, and then go back to the outer loop. As you can see, when the k is equal to 1, L is 0, k equals 1, L is 2, and it stops. And then it will go back to the outer loop. Now k is equal to 2, and the same thing. When k is 3, k less than 3 is false, so this outer loop will also stop, and the nested loop is finished. Thank you for watching my video. Feel free to comment and ask questions.